Really? Another one? Alright, so I guess enough people really did watch and find something to enjoy in the first Venom that a sequel was inevitable, although truth be told, I figured we were always going to get more of these because, to the eternal embarrassment of both the comic book and film mediums respectively, at the point when the Spider-Man movies were first falling under the serious greenlight consideration at Sony back in the weird old days of the 1990s, eventually getting to bring this specific one-note 90s spin-off character to the screen as a bonus was probably likely seen by many as the real reason to do that in the first place. Now, in case you missed the first one or just got here, Venom is a spectacularly overexposed Marvel Comics anti-hero character who looks like the Spider-Man logo and the Punisher logo had a baby, and then that baby grew up to be a Venice Beach surf shop logo who is very popular and merchandisable because it's a solid design, basically. The actual character, on the other hand, is sort of poorly defined and stupid, and has mainly been poorly defined and stupid for about as long as it's existed, so unsurprisingly, the first movie was very, very, very bad. Like, shockingly bad. The kind of bad where they apologize for the movie in the movie.
Yeah, I'm sorry about Venom.
But it also kind of felt like somebody knew that, and or that the wheels had come off behind the scenes pretty early on, which now very much seems to have been the case. So between the finished product ending up in theaters seemingly chopped down to, oh god, just make it short and keep the action and the parts where Tom Hardy is just ad-libbing weird Tom Hardy bullshit and maybe we'll make our money back, and also the studio not immediately saying an absolute no to social media, deciding to jump on a tiny sliver of possible queer subtext in one or two scenes and running with it, and that plus a near billion-dollar global box office take thanks to even bad, semi-unofficial Marvel movies apparently just being dipped in gold and someone in Sony marketing hitting on the stroke of genius to sell it as a straight-up comedy to Chinese audiences. Some combination of all of that worked, and we were always going to get more Venom, so now here's more Venom, this time with an apparently much more Tom Hardy synchronized Andy Serkis in the director's chair, and the promise from the filmmakers that this time they understand what people liked about the first one and plan to deliver more of that, which frankly had me feeling more apprehensive, to be honest, and not just because I wasn't among those who felt the original's weirdness made up for its badness. The thing about bad movies that are fun by accident is that trying to make accidents happen again on purpose just never works, and if I already didn't think Tom Hardy decided to jump in a lobster tank that day was enough to save the first movie, I definitely wasn't looking forward to an entire sequel that was all lobster tank jumps. You get what I'm saying? Now, fortunately, Let There Be Carnage feels like a more organic sequel to its predecessor than I would have thought, in that it feels like they once again set out to actually make a decent movie, failed at that, though probably this time for some different reasons, and what we're presented with instead is once again a speed run through a bare minimum of coherent plot that strings together a bunch of likely previs, FX-heavy action scenes and comedy beats running barely over 90 minutes that doesn't really have any other reason to exist beyond reminding us that Venom is a character who exists, and to drop random interval hints to fanboys about things that may or may not happen in future Marvel and or Sony movies, the most eyebrow-raising of which seems to get casually dropped right at the beginning, involving Naomie Harris' shriek, but everyone is overlooking in lieu of the thing that I'm supposed to not spoil for you in the end credits, and fine, I won't, but it's not really that special. Anyway, as concerns the actual plot, Shriek is the childhood would-be girlfriend of Woody Harrelson's imprisoned death row inmate serial killer Cletus Cassidy, briefly glimpsed at the climax of the first movie, and now back with a fixation on Tom Hardy's crusader journalist Eddie Brock that the film can't seem to make up its mind about the origins of, almost as though the screenplay has been cut up a bunch of times and no longer makes sense. How about that? In the main storyline, which is more of a thing that happens over a couple days, inflated to feature length by a B-plot where Brock and Venom, the bad but sort of good guy alien goo monster symbiote that shares his body, briefly disassociate after a breakup so the film can throw crumbs of bait to its aforementioned alt fanbase, the 2-for-1 vigilantes manage to crack the remainder of Cassidy's unsolved murder cases while interviewing him in prison, which finalizes the execution and leads to a confrontation wherein the killer gets infected with some symbiote particles that manifest as Carnage, a significantly stronger, red-skinned, tentacle-sprouting version of Venom that calls the original its father, hates him, and wants to defeat him because it's not actually clear or satisfactorily explained, like, ever. Just like it's not also clear or explained why it's significant that he's red, only that Venom says it's a big deal but never elaborates on it, why he's a separate entity or what the weird father anger deal is, why he's helping Cassidy in the first place when it's repeatedly established that the symbiotes can just go from body to body, what the deal is with Shriek's sonic scream powers, other than she's just always had them. I mean, they do say what kind of powers they are, so I guess that's a thing now, but without any actual elaboration, even though it kind of feels like that also might have been there at some point and now isn't. And we don't even really get much sense of why Carnage would go along for so long with Cletus and Shriek's post-breakout honeymoon crime spree other than, you know...
movie references.
Ultimately, it's all just so much contrivance to bounce the characters between gags that are all about servicing fans who sincerely like parts of the last one, so more apartment hijinks, more Venom convenience store lady interactions, another brief female Venom appearance, and set pieces that were probably being partially animated before they even finished writing the damn thing, like Carnage does a prison breakout and a big final fight that takes place in a gothic church because the comics these characters originated in were written in the 90s and that's where all the cool edgy fight scenes always had to take place. Already the common refrain from the negative and even half-hearted pass reviews is that it's at least short and to the point, which is true. If nothing else, there's hardly any fat on this, but much like the occasional fits of random weirdness, the appeal of what might otherwise read as genuine slapdash charm evaporated for me the moment it was clear that once again, so basically right the hell away every time, that it's not really all that genuine, that it's not brief and messy through some quirk of production, but because it knows that the audience that otherwise might have cared about any of it making sense is just assuming some forthcoming crossover with the real Marvel movies is gonna fill in the gaps. And apart from watching Hardy try out for Nicolas Cage understudy, that's the only reason they're here anyway. And you know, speaking of which, I'm usually Mr. Hey, let's cut some slack to any studio movie that at least tries to be a little bit weird and be grateful for at least that. At a moment in time when there also happens to be stuff on streaming and in some of the same theaters as this that's actually making the sincere effort to be legit batshit insane, like Prisoners of the Ghostland or Titan. Any amount of bending over backwards to pretend that the sequel to Venom is doing anything special almost feels a bit obscene, so no, I don't think so. 6 out of 10, I have still not bonded with this one, folks.